and welcome to Announcing the Game, where professional public address announcers share their expertise and best practices to help to make you a better public address announcer. I'm Tom Winnicky, the public address announcer at the Division I level at Syracuse University of the Atlantic Coast Conference and at Colgate University of the Patriot League. At this level, I've announced football, men's and women's soccer, field hockey, women's volleyball, men's and women's basketball, men's and women's ice hockey, men's and women's lacrosse, and softball. I've also announced international competition at the 2019 Aurora Games for ice hockey and for basketball. I've also announced at the high school level at Fayetteville Manlius High School in New York State, where I've announced football, boys and girls soccer, field hockey, wrestling, boys and girls basketball, track and field, boys and girls lacrosse, and baseball. I've also announced Section 3 championships in New York State for football, boys and girls basketball, and boys and girls lacrosse. And I've announced the New York State Public High School Athletic Association state championships for football and girls lacrosse. And I'm also the National Association of Sports Public Address Announcers Public Address Announcer of the Year for 2017. In this episode of Announcing the Game, we'll talk about high school and college baseball. We'll go over what to do before you get to the game site, as well as what to do before, during, and after the game. We'll go over who your contacts can be to get this information so you'll be prepared once that first pitch is thrown. We'll go over things that you can do so when the site supervisor sees you walk into their facility, they'll immediately know that the public address announcing is in good hands for that game. You'll become someone that supervisor just doesn't have to worry about. All right, let's start with pre-event. What to do before you ever get to the game site. Now, luck favors the prepared, or Branch Rickey of the old Brooklyn Dodgers with luck is the residue of design, or my dad's favorite, I'd rather be lucky than good. Now, all of these speak to your preparation, things that no one sees you do, but they will hear the results of as you're announcing the game. Now, let's go over some things to help you do this. My suggestion, arrive at the game site 75 to 90 minutes before game time. At both the high school and the college levels, I think that I've built up a bit of a positive reputation with schools because they see that I get there early enough to get what I need from them without interfering with their pregame routines. They see that I respect their time while still getting what I need from them, no matter the sport that I'm announcing. So, now that you're there at the game site, what did you bring so you're prepared for anything? For baseball, are you prepared for the weather? If there's rain in the forecast, do you have a plastic bag to cover your clipboard that has your rosters in it? Is that bag big enough so you or a coach or a college SID can reach in and make some notes without getting the paper wet? Do you have enough pencils in case more than one of them break? How about one of those small plastic pencil sharpeners? You know that if you don't have one, you'll need it. Murphy's Law tends to rear its ugly head at the most inopportune times. Are there erasers on all your pencils? Do you have enough space on your score sheet to accommodate multiple substitutions at a certain position? Do you know the numbers for each position in baseball? Now, most coaches, when they fill out a lineup card, won't list them by their position. They won't write out shortstop, third base, or pitcher. They'll use numbers. So you need to know what positions these numbers represent. Pitcher is number 1, catcher is 2, first base equals 3, second base is 4, third base is 5, the shortstop is number 6, left field is 7, center field is 8, and the right fielder is 9. Now, in preparing for this tutorial, I talked with a state level coordinator for high school baseball. He told me that he knew a person who had announced other state level games and was interested in announcing baseball. As it turned out, when this new announcer got to the game site and was given lineup cards, he looked at them and said, "What do these numbers mean next to each player?" This game was either a state regional or a state final game. I can't remember exactly, but the point of the story is, If you are going to ask to announce baseball games, you better know what positions go with each number. Now, what else did you bring? How about a roll of tape? Now, I always use it to tape lineup cards on the wall next to me or on a tabletop next to my score sheet. Even if you're in the press box, the wind will still blow stuff around. Usually the day that you don't have that roll of tape will be a day when the wind is really swirling. If you have that tape, it'll probably be a nice, calm, sunny day. Remember Murphy's Law? It's best to always be prepared. Now, at the high school level, you may be responsible for getting starting lineups for both teams yourself. Now, by arriving at the game site early enough, that gives you time to meet with a coach or to go over pronunciations and get a lineup card, all before they get involved in their pregame routine, whether they're pitching batting practice, hitting infield, or hitting fungos to the outfield. You just heard me talk about getting there early enough to get a coach before they get into their pregame mode. Now that's perfectly fine for a high school game, but not for a college game. Pronunciations and lineups are best gotten from the team's SID, the Sports Information Director. Find this person on the school's athletics website under Communications. Now usually an SID has a team in the fall, then the winter, and then the spring. Just look for the one assigned to baseball. Stay away from coaches for this information on game day. Respect their time and duties that they need on game day. Go to that SID for any pronunciations or lineups. Now, I always like to call the SID before game day to go over their roster pronunciations over the phone. That just saves me time tracking them down on game day. Plus, they often have other duties that they need to accomplish pregame, so calling them ahead of time works best for me and for them. Now, if you can't do that, remember my recommendation of being at the game site 75 to 90 minutes early. Look for a pronunciation guide in the game notes that may be waiting for you in the press box. Take a look at this before asking the SID how to pronounce names. You see, they put that together for a reason, so check this first. Now be advised though, my experience tells me not to completely trust these pronunciation guides. If done correctly, that syllable that's to be emphasized should be spelled all in caps. Now take my name for example. Phonetically, it should be spelled capital WIN dash lowercase UH dash KEE. It tells you to emphasize the first syllable, Winnicky. If it's just printed all in lowercase, WIN dash UH dash KEE, you don't know what syllable to stress. Is it Winnicky? Is it Winnucky? Is it Winnicky? You just don't know. So after looking through that pronunciation guide, always double check it with the SID from the visiting team. Now doing this once you get there gives you the time to meet with this person before they get busy with those other duties we talked about that they may have on game day. Now just like that high school coach I mentioned earlier that I developed a good relationship with because they know that I get there ahead of time, people at the college level start to see that you go out of your way to respect their time and still get what you need without interrupting their pregame routines. You start to develop that positive relationship with them. Now, speaking of high schools, can you get their roster before game day? Now, many high schools now will post those rosters online. Print them off before arriving at the game site. Saves yourself some time on game day, and you don't have to ask for a roster from each visiting coach. Now get these yourself ahead of time. It just makes the game day go easier. Now if you really want to make an impression with the visiting team, call that athletic department secretary before game day to go over pronunciation. Showing up on game day and talking with a visiting coach for lineups and already knowing how to pronounce their players' names helps to make that good impression. With my mentioning of getting to the game site early, talking to high school coaches or college SIDs, those are examples of the team that we're all part of when it comes to successfully working a game like this. You see, we are all part of a larger group whose goal is the same, putting together a smooth running event for the players, the umpires, and for the fans. Now I just mentioned the umpires. Once the game starts, The game is theirs to run. Our role is to be prepared enough to support them. One way to do that, and this is more for the high school game, but you can certainly do this at the college level as well, is to meet with them quickly before the game. Something as simple as welcoming them to the game site, introducing yourself and going over the pregame schedule with them, or informing them of a special event that will happen pregame will go a long way towards developing a good relationship with the umpires. Now, this is really effective at the high school level because different venues may order things differently. Things like the order for starting lineups, the national anthem, or exchanging lineup cards at home plate. That could be different at every site they go to. One extra plus that comes from meeting with the umpires pregame is to let them know where you will be. So when it comes to them informing both teams of any substitutions, they know where you are, so they can be sure to let you know as well. My suggestion for you is if you're working a high school game, sit right with the scorebook and whoever's doing the music. That way, you make sure everyone is talking or playing music without getting in each other's way. By being next to the scorebook, you're always sure that you're announcing correctly who is up to bat or who happens to be pitching. If you're working a college game, make arrangements to sit with a home SID who's probably already keeping score, the marketing person, and music. Now, this has another advantage when working with a college game. By sitting next to the marketing person, it's easier to make sure that you're talking when you're supposed to. You avoid talking when marketing may want music played or something else scheduled. As I said, they may have music scheduled to start immediately after the third out of every inning. They may want you to quickly read a summary of that half inning before they start the music. Now, whatever that order happens to be, or something else, by sitting with a marketing person, you can be sure that you're always in sync. Let's talk a little bit more about marketing. Marketing's another member of that team I mentioned earlier that we're all a part of. They're responsible for all the copy that we are to read during a game. Everything from a pregame welcome to how to introduce the national anthem to in-inning promotions are all scripted for us. My advice is always ask them for this script and timing sheet ahead of time. This gives us a chance to not only rehearse our lines, but it makes us sure that we pronounce any sponsors' names correctly, something we never want to mess up. Also, ask marketing how they may want a certain copy read. They may want you to sound a bit more excited over one read over another. I feel a promotion between innings might be read much differently than one about being aware of foul balls being hit into the stands. Now, I had mentioned a minute ago to try to sit with this marketing person, but what if they're in a different place? If this is the case, you have to find a way to connect with them. Can you be connected with a headset? Are there walkie-talkies? Is there some other way that they are connected with you? Either way, you have to be able to talk with them. Now, what about the umpires again? How about introducing them along with the starting lineups? Now, at the high school level, some umpires may be okay with that, and some may not. My advice, ask them and then abide by their wishes. One thing I like to add when they're okay with being introduced is to include their umpires association with their names. That's just something to add a little more professionalism to the umpires. At the college level, different conferences may have different rules about this, so some may be okay with this and some conferences may not. That's all well and good. We just need to know beforehand before we go announcing the umpires. Marketing or the homeschool sports information director should have this information. Reading scripts is probably much different at the high school level. You may be given scripts or maybe you won't. So be prepared if it's the latter. Create samples of different kinds of game day copy and run it by the athletic director. 1, it shows that you're well thought out and prepared. And 2, it shows that you're a part of a team and you want the administrator's input. Now, we have some samples of common reads for you on our website, publicaddressannouncer.org. Ask them if there's any other things that they might want announced between innings. Do they want a sportsmanship script read during pregame? Is there someone in authority on site who can enforce this statement if necessary? Do they have specific sponsors that they want ads run for? Work with them to get all of this covered. Okay, you're all set. You have lineup cards from both teams as well as printed rosters. So if you can't read the coach's handwriting on the lineup card, you can still match a number with a name. The umpires know the pregame schedule. You know to start reading your copy once the meeting where lineup cards are exchanged breaks up. So now it's showtime. One simple announcing order for a baseball game would be 1. Welcome to the field, then informing fans of restroom and trash locations, then the lineups, visitors, then the home team, followed by the umpires if they're okay with that, and then the national anthem. Or you may be announcing a game for a team whose manager or head coach wants their team in the field before the national anthem. Well, that's fine. There's not one correct way to order things. Find out what the home team wants, then work with that. For a situation like this, you may order things this way: a welcome to the field, where the restrooms are, where to put their trash, a sportsmanship read. Then introduce the umpires if they're okay, and then reinforce respecting their roles in the game. The home team takes the field and stands at their position while the visiting team now stands at third base, on the third base line. The national anthem is played. As the home team warms up in the field, introduce the visiting batting order. If you have time, read through the home team's batting order. Now remember, when using this type of order of announcing, you need to be completely done by the time the catcher throws down to second base after that last warm-up pitch. Then you can announce the leadoff batter before they step into the batter's box. Now, if you feel that you can't get the home team introduced using this format, there's no worries. Simply introduce them after the top of the first inning ends and when the visiting team takes the field. Now, for this high school game, I would read each roster this way as they were warming up in the field. Leading off for the Hornets and playing first base, a senior, number 12, Chris Nager. Batting second at shortstop, number 5, Patrick Langen. Batting third at third base, a junior, number 1, Dan Rayone. Batting cleanup and playing center field, a senior, number 7, Cooper Miggs. And do that all through 9 starters. For a college game, the only thing that I would add would be hometowns, and that's only okay if marketing approves it. It would sound something like this. Now let's meet today's starting lineups. First, for our guests from Syracuse, New York, the Syracuse Orange. Leading off and playing third base, a sophomore from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, number 31, Billy Hooper. Batting second and catching, a junior from Newark, New Jersey, number 23, Frank May. And these introduced will continue all through the lineup. Now, you heard me refer to the visiting team as our guests. Now, if you've seen any of our previous videos, you've heard me talk about treating the opposing team with respect. They're all on scholarship too. They all take classes and study hard for exams when they're on the road, just as well as the home team. They're away from classes, have to make up work, just like the home team does. They deserve something I call respectful enthusiasm. Referring to them as our guests is just one way for me to do that. Reading their names respectfully is something else that we can all do. Now, when it comes to the home team, I like to do something I've learned from Alan Roach, the public address announcer for the National Football League's Minnesota Vikings, as well as countless Olympic Games and Super Bowls and too many more events to mention. I've heard him refer to the Minnesota Vikings as our Minnesota Vikings. To me, that's much different than saying your Minnesota Vikings. The home team we're announcing for isn't just your team, it's our team. To some, it may just seem like semantics, but to me, it's significant. The home team just doesn't have your voice rooting for it. It has all of our voices pulling for it. For regular season home games, it's perfectly acceptable to use a bit more enthusiasm when announcing things for the home team. We do have to be sure that we're not over the top. Remember that respectful enthusiasm that I mentioned earlier. We are not play-by-play announcers. We are reporters. We are tour guides. And going back to all that preparation we talked about earlier, we are part of the production, but we are not a part of the show. Our job is to inform the fans of what just happened. We leave the color commentary and the opinion to the color commentators and to the columnists. Now, each of you has your own style as a public address announcer. Baseball, to me, speaks to a more traditional style for the PA announcer. Now, I'm from the Northeast, So I grew up listening to people like Sherm Feller at Fenway Park for the Boston Red Sox, or Bob Shepard at Yankee Stadium for the New York Yankees. To me, that more traditional style of announcing fits the game of baseball better. It keeps the focus on the game and what is said, not on how it was said. Now, baseball is different from the other sports that we work. We're not announcing the results of a play like we do in sports like basketball or volleyball, football, hockey, or lacrosse. Instead, we announce who's up to bat or who's in the pitch, and then we let the game speak for itself. We aren't announcing that's Andy Smith with a 3-run home run, putting the Zephyrs up 3-0, or Stephen Jones is now on second with a stand-up double. To me, that's akin to announcing that Andy Smith hit his 2 free throws in a basketball game after I already announced that he's at the line for 2 shots. It's just not needed. College baseball has a pitch clock. For high school, it can depend on what rules the game is being played under. For the NFHS at the high school level, there's a 20-second pitch clock on the books, but it's not often used. According to the NFHS, this rule has been on the books since the late 70s, and it was used as a tool, quote, to use when the pitcher is prolonging the delivery of the pitch because of gamesmanship or overall lack of game efficiency, close quote. If, when the umpire is talking to the pitcher regarding the length of delivery between each pitch, or speaking with a catcher to nudge the other half of the battery to pitch in a more timely manner, or mentioning to the coach at the half inning that the game is being affected by the pitcher's delay and the pitcher doesn't change their behavior, then this is a problem and would result in a penalty being applied, a ball to the batter. This is just something to be aware of if the game slows down considerably due to the pitcher being slow. It's not anything that you would announce, but if then the umpire thinks it gets to the point of applying this rule, be ready to announce that penalty being awarded to the batter. For Little League baseball, there isn't a pitch clock, but there's pitch counts depending on age. As PA announcers, we aren't counting pitches, but we need to be aware that pitchers could be subbed in for during a game because of pitch counts. Now, another thing to be aware of at the high school level that relates to the pace of play are courtesy runners. These are different from pinch runners. A courtesy runner is used for a pitcher or a catcher. Now, if they safely get on base with 2 outs, a courtesy runner can run for them but not take them out of the game. This allows the catcher, for example, to reach base, then come out of the game to get their equipment on for the next half inning. It just keeps the game moving quicker. Before the game or the season, be sure that this is a situation that could come up for games in the region that you're announcing for. Be sure that your state or section or league recognizes this rule and whether they will use it or not. There is a position in baseball that we need to be aware of. It's the designated hitter, the DH. In general, they only come to bat. They're usually listed as a 10th starter who hits for any one of the 9 starting defensive players. Now, they can also be listed as 2 positions, a defensive player and a DH. This is often used to allow pitchers to remain in the game as a hitter while removing them from pitching. Either they reach a pitch count or they're just not throwing strikes that day. When things like this happen, all we need to be able to do as good public address announcers is to correctly announce who is at bat and what position they're in. If it's a substitution in the field, make the announcement of the new player the next time they appear in the game. If it's at bat, announce them then, name, number, and new position. If they first take the field as that new sub, announce it as they take the field with their teammates. Now at second base, number 23, Tony Procopio, number 23. We as public address announcers should be aware of getting these substitutions from the home plate umpire. We just need to focus on who's now where in the batting order and how to correctly identify the player coming up to bat in their new position. Your announcement when a designated hitter comes to bat. Now batting, the designated hitter, number 20, Cooper Miggs, number 20. Now remember when I talked about meeting with the umpires pregame? Letting them know where you'll be works to your advantage when they report the subs to the game. They can talk directly to you. I found it easier for me to help keep track of things like this by actually keeping score myself during the game. Earlier, I talked about sitting next to the person keeping that official scorebook. Now, just like in high school basketball, where the visiting book, while unofficial, sits next to the home book to make sure both books are on the same page, you, while keeping score to keep track of who's in what spot, in what order, and who's up to bat or who's pitching, can constantly check with that official book to make sure you always announce correctly who is in, who's up to bat, and who's pitching. Now remember back to the beginning of this tutorial when I talked about having plenty of pencils and erasers and that cheap little pencil sharpener? Well, here is where they come in really handy. Here's an example of a baseball score sheet with a visiting team on the left and the home team on the right. I put the date of the game and the time of the first pitch. You see, end time. At the time of day of the last out in the last inning, I'd write that here, do a little math and figure out the time of the game, how many hours and minutes for the game. Now let's show you some examples of ways you can use this. So the visiting team comes up first. You announce leading off the shortstop, number 2, Gary Luther, number 2. And he gets up and he grounds out to the shortstop, 6-3, 1 out. Mike Guzman comes up, now batting, the second baseman, number 12, Mike Guzman. And he comes up and hits a single. So you draw a line, 1 base. Jim Chapalia, the catcher, now batting, the catcher, number 40, Jim Chapalia, number 40. And he flies out to center field to number 8. Joe DiGiorgio, the 4th batter in the inning, the center fielder, comes up and flies out to the pitcher, pop out to the pitcher. So 3 outs, draw a line to end the inning. So you know where to start the next inning. So you run your total. No runs were scored, there was 1 hit, there was a single, no errors, and there was 1 player left on base. Now you would score the same thing for the home team for their bottom half of the first, but for this example, we'll just stay with the visiting team. So the second inning comes up. Now there's some substitutions made. Now you notice the pitcher was also the designated hitter. The pitcher in the bottom half of the first inning had trouble throwing strikes. The coach at this, say this high school game, wants to keep this athlete in the game somewhere, but needs another pitcher. So they take him out of the pitching spot. He's still the DH. A new pitcher has to come in. So number 20, Steve Orlando, is now the pitcher. Now what you can do is draw a little line, squiggly line here to know that nobody under that line bats. So Procopio is still the designated hitter, but Orlando is now the pitcher. So in the bottom of the next inning, you would announce now pitching number 20, Steve Orlando. Now let's show some other substitutions. The manager wants to take the second baseman out. So instead, they put number 10, Phil Rudolph, in at second base. And he came in the second inning. So Guzman is out. So you know when this position comes to bat, you would announce Phil Rudolph as the second baseman, not Mike Guzman. And then let's say they make another substitution. Let's say now that they put Jeff Hammond in for Gary Luther at shortstop. So number 1, Jeff Hammond gets written in as the shortstop. Luther is not the shortstop anymore, but the coach wants to keep him in the game, so he's now going to put Gary Luther in left field. So number 2, Gary Luther, is now moved from shortstop to left field. So you know when this position comes up, there's still a left fielder in this spot, but now it's Gary Luther and not Nick Lohr, so you know who to keep track of. And then the inning goes on. So Ron Hebert comes up in the top of the second inning and grounds out to the shortstop, 6-3. Losman comes up and flies out to 7, flies out to the left fielder. Gary Luther comes up in this position at left field, so you announce now batting the left fielder, number 2, Gary Luther, not Nick Lohr. And he hits a single, so he's on base. Dave Bender, the right fielder, comes up and grounds out 6-4, force out Luther at second base, so he was out there. So there's 3 outs, no runs scored. There was 1 hit, the single. There were no errors, but since Luther was out, there was nobody left on base to end the inning. And the game just continues. So these are just some examples of how you can keep track of substitutes in the game to know what position they're in, who's the DH, where are they batting, who's the pitcher, are they batting or not, and so on and so on. Just to give you some examples. Now, getting back to the order of pregame, I went over 2 possible ways to do this, depending on what the home team prefers. Where you put the national anthem is not really important. Just be sure that it's introduced with the respect that it requires. Now, we've created another tutorial in this series on protocols surrounding the national anthem. I would refer you to that video for suggestions how you can introduce the national anthem at your baseball game. Now, a possible addition to the pregame run of show would be a ceremonial first pitch. Now, that's usually planned for the last thing in the pregame routine, but depending on the venue, it could be anywhere in this order. It's our responsibility to know when this occurs in the pregame schedule, announce who's throwing out that first pitch, who they're representing, and any other people out on the mound with them. Let them throw out the pitch and walk off to spontaneous applause. You could possibly ask for another round of applause for so-and-so if you wish. If they're associated with a charity, marketing may have copy for you to read relating how fans can contribute. If they're a past player being honored, they may ask you to read how fans can get an autograph during the game. Whatever the situation, let marketing lead you. Once all the pregame items are taken care of, what is it that we announce in a baseball game? So when the last warm-up pitch is thrown and the catcher throws down to second base, you now can introduce the leadoff batter for that inning. If you're coordinating with music, and in this instance, walk-up music, I would suggest timing it so as soon as that last warm-up pitch is thrown, the catcher throws down to second base, the warm-up music is started to be played. In talking with a college coach, they suggested playing the walk-up music and you introducing the batter simultaneously. Music can adjust their volume as you're talking. Trying to do music first, then announcing the batter second, or the other way around, just gets disjointed. The bottom line is that we, as public address announcers and the person on music, we both need to be finished by the time the batter enters the batter's box. Say what we need to say and get out of the way of the game. People are there to watch the game. They're not there to listen to us. Now, I talked with a college umpire about this, and his term was, don't be intrusive. You've heard me say here and in some of our other tutorials to get out of the way of the game. This is just another example. Now, there's another video in our series of tutorials specifically addressing working with game officials. I would refer you to that video for more information. In general, with introductions, my thought is less is more. I like to stick with who's up to the plate. It could sound something like this. Now batting, the shortstop, number 5, Brody Miggs, number 5. Or the shortstop, number 5, Brody Miggs, number 5. It's simple, says what needs to be said, then gets out of the way of the game. It lets the game speak for itself. Now, your style might be different, and that's fine. My only advice, and I feel strongly about this, is to say what's needed, then get out of the way. Keep the focus on the student athletes and not on ourselves, and be respectful to the game. At the end of each inning, you can give a brief summary, something like this. For the Orange, 2 runs on 3 hits and 1 left on base. Your score after 3 full innings of play. Syracuse 2, Boston College 1. Now, remember earlier when I talked about the advantages of meeting with the umpires pregame and how important it is for them to know where you are so they can also tell you of any lineup changes? See, any changes or substitutions to the lineup must be reported by the team to the home plate umpire. Once they record those changes themselves, they then inform both teams and they inform you. They need to know where you are. For a college game, we use the sports information director, who's hopefully sitting right next to us, to confirm any of those lineup changes. For a high school or a youth league game, hopefully you're seated close enough that you can hear the umpires call in the changes. And since you've already met with them earlier, they know where you are and they can speak directly to you. If it's a pitching change, you can go ahead and announce the new pitcher. Now pitching for the Panthers, number 30, Chris Nager. If it's a new player somewhere else in the lineup, you announce accordingly. If it's a field substitution, you can announce Joe DiGiorgio, now in left field for the Dolphins, or something similar. Now, with all the rules related to substitutions at the high school and college level and related to the designated hitter, when it comes down to it, all we really need to know is who is in the lineup, when to announce them, and what position to announce them for. But I feel just announcing something like Chester, number 8, now in center field for the Golden Flyers, or now pitching for the Blue Devils, number 15, Dave Bender, is more than enough. Remember, be quick, be accurate, and stay out of the way of the game. Marketing at the college level may have promotions between innings, or they may confirm with coaches a 7th inning stretch for a 9-inning ball game. This could involve you or could involve an in-game host. If it's you, they'll have specific reads for you to do at specific times. If it's an in-game host handling these, they'll be out in the stands or in foul territory and they'll be quick so as not to interfere with the pace of the game. It may be something like a pitching challenge in foul territory between innings that still allows the fielding team to warm up. Regardless, be ready to go when prompted so it can go off without a hitch. And if it's an in-game host, you're basically off the hook. They'll have specific time between innings to do a promotion, call attention to a group of fans in attendance, or something else. Or at a high school game or maybe a little league game, nothing may be planned at all. You just may have some sponsor reads to read between innings. Whatever it is, find out what it is ahead of time so you can rehearse it and be ready to go when cued up. So what about umpire signals? How much of that do we need to know to announce baseball effectively? Now, we aren't announcing each ball and strike, with the exception of a pitch clock violation that I mentioned earlier. We're not announcing whether a ball was hit fair or foul, whether time was called, or whether a base runner was tagged out or not. We aren't doing those things. Video review is an option for college games. There are certain types of plays that can and cannot be reviewed. Now, as a public address announcer, unless specifically informed by the umpire, it's best to stay just simply saying the previous play is under video review. Then once a decision has been made on the play, you can watch the umpire to see what the call is and announce it accordingly. On the other hand, you may see a situation, let's say for the infield fly rule, a situation with a runner on first and second or the bases are loaded, there's a pop fly in the infield with less than 2 outs. You see the umpire in a college game point up with their right arm and yell, "Infield fly." Or at a high school game, they'll raise their right fist up and call "Infield fly." After the play, you could announce that the batter was called out due to the infield fly rule. Now, a word to the wise regarding this example. Check with your home coaches pregame before announcing things like this. They may just want you to keep it simple, not try to explain things, like this example, the infield fly rule. On the other hand, they may be in a position where they want to promote their sport to the local fans and may want you to explain things like this. If that's the case, a preseason meeting with these coaches would be imperative. Be absolutely sure of what they want announced and be sure that you can do it without getting in the way of the flow of the game. If you feel comfortable with the rules surrounding this, then feel free to use it to explain the play. Those in attendance could appreciate it. But remember, be sure that you are absolutely correct and that you can do all this before you need to announce the next batter of that inning. Remember, that has to be done before they step in the batter's box. Again, the last thing you want to do is have to correct yourself when you make an announcement or have to listen to the umpire to tell you to stop talking. Other than that, just keep it simple. Who's up, who's pitching, and a summary after each half inning. Now you can find examples of umpire signals on our website at publicaddressannouncer.org. Just click on Tools at the top of the screen. What about timeouts? This is a little different than in other sports. A batter can ask for time between pitches, or a base runner can call time to dust themselves off after a play. We don't announce that. Also, teams are allowed a certain number of mound visits per game, whether it's just with other players or with a coach or a manager. How many visits they get is really not our concern. And again, we don't need to announce that a team called timeout to meet on the mound. That's the umpire's job to police this, so we just let them take care of it. What about a game ending in a tie? For a college game, if the game is tied after 9 complete innings or 7 innings in a doubleheader, extra innings occur. The game continues as normal until a winner is determined. An exception for a tie game at this level would usually happen at non-conference or maybe tournament games. Extra innings could be played differently depending on, again, what was decided pre-game. Think of it like a ground rule. If agreed upon, it would start with a runner starting at second base to start each extra inning. Now, this would always be the player who would be scheduled to bat last in that particular inning. If you're working a high school game, know under what guidelines the game is being played under. NFHS guidelines say that the game ends in a tie unless the state association has a tiebreaker procedure. So find out what your state's association has planned. Your state or section or league may simply opt to continue regular play until a winner is determined. Extra innings wouldn't then start with a runner on second base. Also, any game that's tied at the end of 5 full innings of play, when the game is called, let's say for the weather or for darkness, shall be a tie game again, unless the state association has adopted a specific game-ending procedure. So if there is such a plan in place, be ready to announce it if the game will be resumed at a later date and when fans can go to find that new time and date. Just be sure you know under what auspices your game is being played under before announcing anything about extra innings. What about a mercy rule? Again, know what is governing your baseball game. For college, the NCAA says by conference rule or by mutual consent, the game ends when one team is up by 10 or more runs after 7 complete innings of play, or 6.5 innings if the home team is ahead. So be sure of this as it relates to your game. For the NFHS rules, it's different. If a team is up by 10 after 5 innings, or 4.5 if the home team is ahead, the game ends. Different states may have different guidelines. So it's on us to find out this information for the games that we announce in the states where we work. The best place to start looking would be your school district's athletic director. Give them a call between the winter and spring seasons. Things may slow down a bit for them in their office at this time, so it could be a good time to track this person down. Little League also has different guidelines depending on the age of the players. So just like extra innings, be aware of what guidelines your game is being played under before making any announcements about a mercy rule. What do we do in the event of an injury? The answer is simple. Nothing. No music, no announcements, nothing. We don't want to do anything that could interfere with communication on the field for the injured player. When that player either gets up on their own or is helped off the field, let the crowd spontaneously applaud and leave it at that. Well, guess what, folks? Weather happens. Weather delays are just a part of baseball. Usually the host school, or possibly both teams' coaches, are responsible for seeing if the field is playable before the game starts. Once the game begins, the umpires are in charge of delaying or canceling the game due to weather or darkness or something else. If and when this happens, be ready to announce to the crowd exactly what the umpires want said. If it's just raining and the game is delayed and people happen to stay in the stands, if you're also in charge of the music, do you have a rainy day music playlist? How about Who'll Stop the Rain by Creedence Clearwater Revival, or Set Fire to the Rain by Adele? How about Raindrops Keep Falling on My Head by B.J. Thomas? What about Fire and Rain by James Taylor, or Love a Rainy Night with Eddie Rabbitt. Then there's always Rainy Days and Mondays Always Get Me Down by the Carpenters. Just be sure when using music like this that all copyrights have been adhered to before using any music. Marketing is usually in charge of something like this. At a high school level, make sure the athletic director approves all the music. Now, there are examples of other playlists on our website, publicaddressannouncer.org. Now, let's say you're working a night game and the lights go out, or the scoreboard just decides to die. The umpiring crew wants to know who's in charge of fixing it and when it'll be done. Any decision on this will be communicated up to you, and then you communicate it to the crowd. Also, what are the emergency plans for a situation like this? Is there a plan for you to ask for people to stay in their seats and wait for further news or instructions? Is the plan, say, for a thunderstorm, for you to direct fans back to their cars or inside in a nearby building? We also have another tutorial in this series about specifically how to handle emergency situations like these and others. Again, I would refer you to that for more information. Phew, the game's ended. You've caught all the substitutions and the pitching changes accurately. You survived a weather delay or extra innings. Now what? Well, if it's a college game, what has marketing already prepared? That's what you go with. If it's a single game, you can begin to wrap things up. If it's the first game of a doubleheader, you can announce when the second game will begin. Usually no anthem is played for the second game of a doubleheader. Just check with marketing or the SID to be sure. Now, once the lineup cards have been turned in for that second game of a doubleheader, whether for college or high school, you could just read them off. Teams won't run out as they're introduced for the second game of a doubleheader. So it's best just to read these new rosters 5 to 10 minutes before the first pitch of the second game. High school may also have a post-game script for you, or maybe they don't. If you're allowed some input, consider things like this. Give a final line score for the game. Read runs, hits, errors, and players left on base for each team. You get that from the score sheet that you kept during the game and that you were constantly checking with the official scorebook or sports information director with. Now you know that your statistics are accurate. Then, end with a statement for the time of the game. On your score sheet, record the time of day of that first pitch. Then record the time of day for the last out. Then calculate how many hours and minutes the game lasted. Altogether, it could sound something like this. For the Blue Devils, 3 runs on 7 hits, no errors, and 5 left on base. For the Panthers, 6 runs on 12 hits, 1 error, and 4 left on base. Time of the game, 1 hour and 54 minutes. Then, as part of your college post-game read, you could add something like this. If the next game for the home team is on the road, instead of just reading when the next home game is, read where the team travels next. If the game is broadcast somewhere, announce where fans can tune in to still follow the team when they're on the road. Then add their next home game and where they can get their tickets. It could sound something like this. The Panthers next hit the road when they travel to Atlanta, Georgia on May 5th through the 7th when they take on the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets. The game on May 6th is available for you on the ACC network. The Panthers then return here to Charles L. Cost Field for a 5-game homestand, which begins May 10th when the Panthers host the West Virginia Mountaineers, with the first pitch set for 6 o'clock. Get your tickets at pittsburghpanthers.com. Now, I like to do this to keep our fans connected to the team, even when they're out on the road. For high school games, I like to announce the next game for both teams and thank fans from both teams for attending. And it could sound something like this. We want to thank you for attending today's game and for your continued support of high school baseball at both Fayetteville Manlius and Cazenovia High Schools. And whether you are a fan of the Hornets and travel to Jamesville DeWitt this Thursday for a 4 o'clock start with the Red Rams, or you are a fan of the Lakers and are right back here on Thursday for a 4 o'clock start with Marcellus, we'd like to remind all of you that all of us here with Cazenovia High School, as well as the town of Cazenovia Police, would ask that you all please buckle up and enjoy a safe trip home. Well, thanks for watching this episode of Announcing the Game. I hope you found some parts that will help you when you announce high school or college baseball. Please email any constructive comments to me at my email address on the screen. And feel free to browse our website for more resources and all things public address announcing. I'm Tom Winnicky, and I look forward to hearing you on the mic.